Apple has created quite a few failed products in their lifetime, including the Newton MessagePad, Power Mac G4 Cube, and iPod Hi-Fi, but perhaps their most consequential failure was the 2013 Mac Pro, nicknamed the Trash Can Mac because of its striking resemblance to the average office trash bin. And today, that just may be the best use for one of these machines, since they failed to meet the expectations of Pro users who have always been the Mac Pro's target demographic since the product debuted in 2006. So in this video, we're going to find out what caused the Mac Pro to fail and why it was so devastating to Apple and Pro users alike. This is Greg with Apple Explained, and I want to thank Squarespace for sponsoring this video. If you want to help decide which topics I cover, make sure you're subscribed, and voting polls like this one will show up in your mobile activity feed. Now, all the reasons why the 2013 Mac Pro failed can be traced back to one fatal flaw: its design. Apple has a reputation of creating incredible looking hardware that's even been featured in museums. In fact, Apple's design team is known for having the most influence over product development. Typically, the engineering or manufacturing teams have that level of control. And while a design-driven company has its benefits, it also has drawbacks. You know how Apple's power cables split open and fray super easily? It's because they don't have a strain relief, since the design team thought they looked too ugly. And that same emphasis on form over function caused all sorts of issues with the Mac Pro. So what exactly was wrong with its design? Well, it was 8 times smaller than the previous model, and while Apple bragged about this during its introduction, the reality was less space meant less expandability. If you wanted to add hard drives or DVD drives to expand your Mac Pro's capabilities, they had to be connected externally with a Thunderbolt cable. And you can see how messy someone's desk could become when they don't have extra space inside the machine where things are neatly organized. But this wasn't just a matter of aesthetics, it also affected the product's longevity. Since the 2013 Mac Pro wasn't nearly as upgradable, that meant the technology inside the machine would become outdated faster than before. And while this may not sound like a big deal, since most Mac users don't worry about upgrading components in their MacBook Air, the situation for Pro users is completely different. When you're spending, in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars on a pro-level computer, you expect to get your money's worth and use that machine for much longer than a $1,000 MacBook. And that's the biggest mistake Apple made when designing the Mac Pro. For some reason, they were trying to make it smaller, lighter, and more compact, as if they were creating a notebook. But in reality, that's not what Pro consumers are looking for in a computer, since it's often just sitting on the ground anyway. They need something that's going to deliver the most power and expandability for their money, something the Mac Pro was severely lacking. And something else most Pro consumers need is their own website, which of course you should build with Squarespace. I actually started using Squarespace years ago to create appleexplained.com, and I chose their platform since it has a super easy to use drag and drop interface and the most website templates to choose from compared to any other site builder. But what I thought was really cool is that I could add an e-commerce store to my site when I was selling merch a couple years ago without starting over from scratch. Plus, the payment processor was built in, and I could print shipping labels straight from Squarespace. But you can sell more than physical items. It's also possible to sell digital items like ebooks and music, or services if you're a consultant or fitness coach. It really is an all-in-one platform designed to do almost anything you can imagine. And you can get all this for cheaper than you might think, especially if you use the link squarespace.com/appleexplained, since you'll get 10% off your first purchase. You can find that link in the description. Alright, now another big issue caused by the Mac Pro's compact design was heat. Have you ever noticed how gaming notebooks are typically the thickest, biggest, heaviest models on the shelf? That's because they're equipped with high-performance graphics cards and processors that generate way more heat than an average notebook. So to keep those components from overheating, lots of fans are added over a larger surface area. And we saw the same thing with Apple's Mac Pro Tower. It was a big box of high-performance parts with 8 fans to keep everything cool. But when they decided to stuff all those components in a space 1/8 the size, Apple had to invent a completely new thermal technology. They called it the Unified Thermal Core and claimed it efficiently shared thermal capacity across all the processors. And since it only used one fan, the Mac Pro was as quiet as the Mac Mini. But there was one problem. The new cooling system was designed to accommodate a dual GPU setup, which Apple thought would best serve pro consumers' needs. But things didn't pan out that way, as demand grew for a powerful single GPU architecture. And that's when the Mac Pro hit a roadblock. It didn't have space for expansion, and it didn't have the thermal capacity for higher performance graphics, making it a very poor choice for pro users. But there was another component to the Mac Pro's release that made it even more damaging than other failed Apple products, since it came at a crucial moment in the company's history. Steve Jobs had just left Apple and passed away 2 years earlier, and for many people, Tim Cook hadn't yet proved himself as a worthy replacement, mainly because they saw him as a business manager instead of a product visionary like Jobs, and this earned Apple a lot of criticism that they were no longer innovative and were doomed to fail since Jobs left in 2011, just like what happened when he left in 1985. And while that may sound ridiculous today, it was a very common sentiment back then, and caused people to closely monitor Tim Cook's every move. So what does this have to do with the Mac Pro? Well, when it was first revealed during a sneak peek at Apple's 2013 WWDC, Phil Schiller said this:
"Can't innovate anymore, my ass."
Yeah, so that's pretty embarrassing considering what we know about the product now, and once customers recognized the Mac Pro's limitations, they took it as evidence that Apple really didn't care about the professional market anymore since they completely lost sight of those users' needs. Which brings me to my next point. The 2013 Mac Pro was the second generation model, with the first being introduced in 2006. That's a gap of 7 years where professional customers were waiting to buy their next machine. It was the longest Apple has ever took to release a next-gen pro-level desktop. And it actually sparked rumors that the Mac Pro might be discontinued, with Apple focusing instead on more popular and profitable mobile devices like the iPhone and iPad. That's why Apple revealed the Mac Pro early as a sneak peek, something they rarely do, to prove that they were still focused on serving the pro market. But that backfired once people began using the machine themselves, since it turned out to be a bad fit for most pro users. This led to even more criticism that Tim Cook didn't know what he was doing as CEO and wasn't capable of making great products. Apple eventually recognized they took the Mac Pro in the wrong direction and had a sort of do-over in 2017. Schiller admitted the machine needed to be modular and that their team was, quote, completely rethinking the Mac Pro, although it was less of a rethinking and more of a return to the way it was before. In early 2018, Apple finally introduced the third generation Mac Pro, which did feature a large modular design with 3 fans and proved to be the best pro machine Apple has ever made. Alright guys, thanks for watching till the end. Don't forget to subscribe to help decide which topics I cover, and I'll see you in the next video.